I've been musing on a curious convergence. The modern thoughts du jour for transcendental meditation and the old avant-garde of sound poetry. It may not seem like it makes sense at first. One is a popular wellness practice with millions of practitioners worldwide. The other, a fringe 20th century art form that prized gibberish and sound over sense. But on closer look, the link becomes pretty uncanny. So, TM, or Transcendental Meditation, popularized by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and now, until recent, was taught by celebrities like David Lynch, centers on silently repeating a personal mantra for 20 minutes twice a day. Crucially, these mantras are deliberately meaningless sounds, not words or phrases. They are explicitly chosen to be not meaningful syllables that don't translate into any familiar language or concept. By design, they have no semantic content. They exist purely for their sound value or their vibrational value. As one TM guide explains, mantras are, quote-unquote, valued for their soothing vibration they produce rather than any linguistic content. Because if the world had a literal meaning, your mind would get caught up in those... if the word had any literal meaning, your mind would get caught up in those associations. Long story short, Transcendental Meditation trains practitioners to fix attention on sound itself, primarily gentle vowels and hums that can be thought without active thought, and to allow the mind to float inward, undistracted by everyday meaning. Notably, David Lynch, who has meditated daily since 1973, calls the mantra the key that opens the door, one that lets the mind dive deeper and deeper into happiness. This quality, verse without words, is precisely what early sound poets invented a century ago. By one definition, sound poetry, quote-unquote, is an artistic form in which the phonetic aspects of human speech are foregrounded instead of more conventional semantic and syntactic values. Verse without words. The Dadaists and Futurists championed nonsense and the liberation of words, breaking syntax into pure noise or music. Raoul Hausmann, for example, exploded meaning completely. His works from 1918 to 1919 were these phonetic poems and recordings like sound rel or strings of untranslatable syllables. Famously, zhao and the like, meant to be heard as raw sound rather than understood. Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven's 1920 Klink Hratzvinja is described as a morning song in nonsense sounds that transcended national boundaries. Even Edith Sitwell, when creating her wordplay poems for Facade, explicitly dubbed them abstract poems, that is, patterns of sound, and likened them to the transcendental virtuosity of Liszt's etudes. In all these cases, meaning is stripped away and the texture of the voice, rhythm, timbre, vowel, openness, becomes the point. What's striking is that TM mantras are doing almost the same thing, but for inner experience rather than art. A mantra like Shirim or Kirim is chosen precisely because it carries no emotional associations. It is a neutral, soothing sound that lets the mind drift towards quietude, according to simplypsychology.org. As one meditator put it, the mantra itself is nothing but a meaningless sound, and the meaninglessness of that sound allows for a person to step away from anything else that has meaning attached to it, which brings a person to a state of deep consciousness. In practice, the chants of TM sound eerily like the recitations of sound poets. These long ahs and light consonant taps and humming endings uttered softly and repetitively. TM teachers even advise ending mantras in open vowels or nasals so they can be hummed mentally. In effect, meditators are winding up performing a gentle, personal sound poem in their minds. And this is the interesting point. Because TM is now so mainstream, with an estimated 6 million people meditate daily worldwide, this non-semantic vocal practice is becoming part of everyday life. Think of high-profile devotees, like the Beatles, who spent a lot of time with Guru Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, spread mantra meditation in the 60s. And in recent years, David Lynch, who funded TM programs and credit TM for his advanced creativity, has made it fashionable to chant empty syllables. Large corporations, universities, and even schools have TM courses that are often taught by ex-Hollywood stars. As a result, more people are hearing and vocalizing meaningless sounds for benefit, without alarm. They learn to appreciate how a soft sh or reem can carry them into a calmer mood. This shift of public attention onto sound as sound is possible soil for a revival of sound poetry. If millions practice silently mouthing soothing nonsense each morning, why shouldn't some of them wonder about the artistry of vocal sound itself? The same qualities that make mantras meditative, their rhythmic unfolding, their sensual timbre, the way they dissolve the everyday life and the ego syntax, are precisely what sound poets played with. In other words, TM is inadvertently training people to recognize the spiritual and aesthetic value of non-semantic vocal expression. One TM writer even notes that through daily mantra, inner silence arises where boundless bliss and creativity flourish. This is a strikingly parallel to what avant-garde poets sought, a creative state unbounded by literal meaning. Imagine a new listener, having meditated for years, suddenly encountering a performance of Hugo Ball's Caravane or Schwitter's Uswanate. They may no longer dismiss it as random gibberish, but hear it as a kind of collective mantra, playful, liberating, oddly familiar from their meditation practice. Conversely, sound poets and performers might take inspiration from Eastern vocal techniques, incorporating sustained hums or gentle chants into readings. The once arcane rituals of TM, sitting quietly and repeating a seed syllable, bear a family resemblance to sound poetic experimentation. They both create an extraordinary use of the voice that escapes conventional language. So, the recrudescence of transcendental meditation could unknowingly act as a bridge back to sound poetry, to kind of fulfill Marcel Duchamp's prediction as the sound poetry of Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven as the future, which we are not there yet. By popularizing the idea that pure sound, even meaningless babble, can be profound, it reopens the cultural ear to verse without words. Sound poems may once again be seen not as some nerdy, obscure, avant-garde puzzles, but as valid meditative art. What was once niche Dadaist play could become, through the influence of transcendental meditation, a renewed form of spiritual and artistic practice. In a very 21st century twist, chanting mantras in your living room might just make recital halls ready for non-semantic vocal performance, proving that the vocal nonsense of both meditation and sound poetry share a deep, almost transcendental purpose. The consciousness movement of today may thus nurture a sound poetic renaissance, a return of art and pure sound.